Have you ever tracked down a famous deep sky object in your telescope and felt absolutely nothing when you saw it? You know, that hollow, that's it feeling? I want you to hear this. It's not your telescope, it's not your eyes, and it's not some failure on your part. You were chasing the wrong thing for the wrong reason. Most famous deep sky objects aren't famous because they look stunning through a telescope. They're famous because of their science, their history, or their photographs. And none of that helps you when you're standing in a field at 1 a.m. in the cold. Today, I'm showing you 5 hobby killers in the Messier Catalog. Objects whose reputations are completely disconnected from what you'll actually see in a telescope. And I'll give you 5 alternatives that are sure to take your breath away. Here's the mental model I want you to carry into this video. Back in the late 1700s, Charles Messier wasn't building a greatest hits list. He was a comet hunter, and he was annoyed by fuzzy things in the sky that kept fooling him. His catalog is literally a list of things that aren't comets. It was a nuisance log. Over time, astronomers and photographers latched onto these objects for their scientific significance and their photogenic qualities. And those things are real, but they have almost nothing to do with surface brightness, which is the only thing that your eye actually cares about at the eyepiece of a telescope. I call this the intent gap, the distance between why an object is famous and why it's actually worth looking at. When those two things don't match, that's when the "that's it" feeling starts creeping in. We start with M1, the Crab Nebula, often called, not so affectionately, M Disappointment. The story behind this thing is genuinely incredible. In 1054 AD, Chinese, Japanese, and Arab astronomers all independently recorded a new star in the sky so bright that it was visible in daylight for weeks. What we're looking at today is the expanding debris cloud from that explosion. The Hubble photo of M1 is equally incredible. A spiderweb of gas and dust sprawling out across space like a colorful net. And then you point your telescope at it. In a backyard telescope, M1 is a faint, featureless smudge, an oval fog. You can coax a little more out of it with averted vision, but it will never match the Hubble image living in your head. Classic intent gap. You're chasing the science and the story, and those don't show up in your eyepiece. For an alternative, I recommend one of Messier's brighter planetary nebula, M27, the Dumbbell Nebula. It's a full magnitude brighter, larger in apparent size, and it has a shape. A distinctive apple core silhouette that I've observed with just a 6-inch telescope in my heavily light-polluted backyard. Same category, completely different experience. My favorite category of deep sky objects are planetary nebula. They are the glowing shells left behind when a star, like our sun, reaches the end of its life. Each one is wonderfully unique and carries a distinct personality. But this next one is a trap. M97, the Owl Nebula, earns its name from 2 dark patches that give it the look of an owl's face. In photographs, it's charming and distinctive. At star parties, I regularly show it to people and they love it. Even the most inexperienced of observers are able to pick out the faint circular shape against the dark sky. But only because I'm running an O3 filter. Without one, it nearly disappears. It shows up on beginner target lists constantly, but it's really a filtered object. If you don't own an O3 filter, M97 will almost certainly let you down. Instead of chasing M97, go after M76, the little dumbbell. It has a lower magnitude on paper, but it is a much smaller object in the sky, so that brightness is condensed into a tighter package, and that makes it easier to spot without specialized filters. I find M76 a genuine treat every time, and I think you will too. If you've made it this far and found this content useful, please like the video and consider subscribing. I promise the next 3 objects are even more illuminating. The most common type of object in Messier's catalog are galaxies. There are 40 of them, and M101 is the one that trips people up the most. Also known as the pinwheel galaxy, M101 is a face-on spiral with gorgeous, sweeping arms that stretch across photographs beautifully. It's up in Ursa Major, so it's easy to find, and it looks like it should be a showpiece object. I've had people at public programs request it by name, including some experienced observers, who then struggle to see it at all, even when the scope was pointed right at it. The issue is surface brightness. Being face-on spreads its light across a huge apparent area, and what you get visually is a ghostly, diffuse glow that asks a lot of your sky conditions and your patience. For an alternative, I promise M51, the Whirlpool galaxy, won't disappoint you. It's in the same part of the sky, and it's also a face-on spiral, but it's dramatically more rewarding. I've picked it up in a 5-inch scope from light-polluted sites, and you can clearly see its bright core. Push it to a 10-inch under dark skies, and the spiral structure starts to emerge. And as a bonus, M51 is interacting with a companion galaxy, NGC 5195, which sits right next to it and is easily visible. The double bright cores really make this pop out against the sky, and you're getting 2 galaxies for the price of 1. Sounds like a Crazy Willy commercial. This next one's a different kind of disappointment, and I want to be clear about why. M45, the Pleiades, is not a faint object. Everyone knows it. You've probably spotted it with your naked eye dozens of times without even trying. So why is it on this list? Because it's one of the first things new observers try to cram into an eyepiece, and it's nearly impossible to frame. The cluster spans several degrees of sky, and a telescope shows you a handful of stars with a lot of dark empty space in between them. It gives you none of the context that makes the Pleiades beautiful. This is a binoculars object, full stop. For a stunning open cluster, you should seek out M11, the Wild Duck Cluster. It's a bright, densely packed open cluster in scutum that's shaped like a triangle and resembles a flock of ducks in flight. It's one of the most populated open clusters in the sky, and it frames beautifully in an eyepiece. It's always a showstopper, and it will become one of your favorites. And finally, the one that personally stung me. The Eagle Nebula, home to the Pillars of Creation, arguably the most iconic photograph the Hubble Space Telescope has ever produced. I remember being genuinely excited to observe this from a dark sky site for the first time. And then I looked through the eyepiece. The Pillars of Creation are not visible. The nebulosity is faint and unstructured, if you can even detect it at all. In fact, Messier himself cataloged this primarily as an open cluster. The nebula component was almost an afterthought. This is the intent gap at its most extreme. A photograph so famous it has completely rewritten people's expectations of the visual object. For a spectacular alternative that I love, go after M17, the Swan Nebula. The region of the sky around the Eagle Nebula is packed with other great nebula, and M17 is one of my favorites. Once you spot this one, you cannot miss its striking resemblance to a swan gliding across the surface of a lake. It's brighter, more structured, and it delivers every time. The goal here isn't to tell you to never look at the famous stuff. It's to tell you to look at them for the right reasons. Look at M1, the Crab Nebula, because you want to see the ghost of a star that exploded 1,000 years ago and captivated people's minds of the time. Your eyepiece can show you the remains, but it can't tell you the story. The Messier Catalog is 110 objects compiled by a man who mostly wanted them out of his way. And it's often been interpreted as the beginner's list for amateur astronomers. That couldn't be further from the truth. Many of them do look incredible through a telescope, but some of them are famous for entirely different reasons. And if you're not clear on which is which, the night sky can start to feel like it's letting you down. One of the most common questions I get in the comments is about eyepieces. I've put together a free eyepiece guide that walks you through what to expect and how to choose the right ones for your setup. And if you want to go deeper behind the scenes at Night Sky Voyager, consider joining me on Patreon or as a channel member here on YouTube. Links for all of those are in the description. The night sky isn't letting you down, you're just seeing it for what it actually is, not what you were told it would be. This is Trevor from Night Sky Voyager. Thanks for watching.